Hello, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. How are you, Michael?
Doing well. Thank you for being willing to join us with this special needs ministry conference in Singapore. We are so excited to have you. For all of you that are here in Singapore with me now, the reason why I wanted to ask Michael to be a part of this is because the Lord brought us together several years ago as friends, and we have many mutual passions and affections and ministry. And we've realized that the Lord does incredible things around the world to place people where he chooses to place them. And when you meet people, it's not on accident. One of the things that I love and appreciate about his life specifically is his desire to care for and come alongside those with special needs. So, Michael, would you be able to just share an introduction of who you are and how you became involved with special needs ministry?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to. I my background with serving in special needs actually goes back like when I was in early education as a student with a lot of friends that I grew up with in a small school. And many of my friends had a variety of disabilities. Some were physical, some had medical special needs, and then others would be what you would consider maybe invisible disabilities, things that you don't see, you might not know. Something seems different about a friend. And then years later, you learn about autism or even things like traumatic brain injuries. And so I grew up with friends with a variety of disabilities. You have Down syndrome as something that's very recognizable around the world, and these were some of my best friends. And so these were people I grew up with. And so naturally, that's the place God placed me and grew me up. And so my heart was just already attuned, I think, to people who were impacted by disability and special needs. And so I think that was clearly the Lord's work early on. And so it was for me, it wasn't something that was shocking or startling. It was just these are my friends. And so
Yeah.
moving forward throughout life, these are people that when I see even the ones with invisible disabilities, things that you can recognize, maybe that, oh, maybe I'm not going out and diagnosing people, but that if that's something that I'm seeing or recognizing, my mind then goes to, okay, what are things that I can do to be a friend to that person? How can I love them practically? Whether that's at church or even just at a grocery store, or somebody encounter at work or on the road. And so growing up, that was my experience. My parents were very loving in my life and helped train me how to love people practically. And then obviously at the church I'm in now, same situation. And the special needs ministry at my church, I started volunteering there um, with no formal training, and definitely going into that, it is intimidating, and there are fears associated with, you know, what if I fail? What if I say the wrong thing, or I make some weird facial expression, or I don't know how to communicate to somebody maybe who can't communicate back to me? What if it's someone who's nonverbal? And so there are fears, and I had to deal with them myself. And I think I'd probably consider myself a recovering people pleaser and a recovering perfectionist. And
Mm.
so my approach to ministry was difficult. And so I had to deal with that in my own heart. It was like, this isn't about me, first of all. It's about serving the Lord by serving his people. And then often when you're serving his people, you realize you're actually being served in reverse, and like how much more you are being blessed by the people that you think you're helping. You're actually really not there to help them. So for me, it was being a friend, and at the time
Mm.
it was mostly to children or not even quite young adults. But now this is years later, so the population of in our special needs ministry is anywhere from practically infant to basically young adult, past even high school age, even into college age, whether they're actually out of college or not. And so that's it's a very growing and sanctifying environment to be in. And so that's where the Lord has taken me. And this is all just through volunteer work. This isn't my professional career, but I still do that even so within my church setting, and then even beyond that, through other volunteer and outreach efforts in the community. And so it's really neat to see how the Lord provides new opportunities each day.
Hmm. So I love how God placed people in your life so that it grew from this organic, um, I guess you'd say the relationships grew organically so that you weren't even really thinking about it. Um,
Right. Exactly.
I I think that would be ideal, and if everyone could have that opportunity, we can pray to that end that it would just become so
Yeah.
normal
Yeah.
that people would say, "Oh, I don't even have to think twice." But for those that have not spent time with other people with special needs, with disabilities, how would you encourage them to just get started if they're in a local church and they see people with special needs at that church, but they have some of those fears that you alluded to that um, are stereotypically attached to special needs? How would you encourage them?
Get started with even with those fears. Take just one step at a time. Like commit to do something. Commit to even just putting it like on a trial basis, like go for one day. If you're talking about one Sunday at church, for a Sunday school class, if it's a like a hybrid model, if it's where if the person that you're if it's a buddy program and you're going to try to be a buddy with someone, maybe um just take that next step and push yourself out of your comfort zone, like just one step outside of your comfort zone. Maybe it's even before you're actually volunteering in the ministry or even putting on a trial. Maybe it's just like you see a person or a family that's impacted by disability in your church, and the first step you take is looking at them and smiling and saying hello. And maybe that's
Hmm.
the first step you take. So like it doesn't have to be all or nothing right at the beginning. You don't have to have everything lined up. Just start small. I think I would say that for a whole special needs ministry. Start small for your own involvement in a special needs ministry. Start small, lay a solid foundation, and then set it up to scale long term. It could grow into something great and big, but it could stay small. Maybe that's the Lord's plan too. Is maybe the Lord has you there for one relationship and one friendship.
Hmm. And that's very helpful. So if someone is thinking, let's take a look at the buddy program, for example. So if a local church wants to have buddies, and we're talking about ages where some young men or young women have their group of friends, and they're trying to decide, do I commit to this? Or if I'm assigned to um, the person that I'm coming alongside and I'm going to be their buddy, I'm saying no to these other relationships on Sundays, or maybe I won't be included anymore. And there are some degrees of peer
Mm.
pressure. Um, how would you include, or how would you advise some of those young students to find ways to serve and to get involved in the ministry?
And that's actually a really that is tough, and that could fall in the fear category, the whole concept of peer pressure, or even that fear of missing out on other opportunities with other people. One of the things, hopefully this is helpful, it's something I've observed through it's a ministry called Johnny and Friends, and they do different international outreaches, but they also do, for me, locally in the state of Texas, they do what they call a family retreat, and it's like a summer camp, but for the whole family impacted by the disability. And so with that, there are people like me who come alongside these families during the camp week as volunteers. And what I've noticed with the volunteer group that we have, it continues to grow in terms of even how young our volunteers are. And so this age bracket, or this group that you're talking about, who have their peer groups, they're in youth group or they're in college. Um, the younger that I see, the more I'm noticing too is that you're actually building new friendships too. So it's like, don't, I'm not saying discard your other friends that you're not going to see anymore because you're going to be involved in a Sunday program at church. Um,
Yeah.
you'll see them other times later on that same Sunday or throughout the week, maybe, and maybe not, but also through this ministry that you might be participating in, like I see at the camp that I volunteer at, new lifelong friendships are formed and new bonds are made with people that were originally strangers to you, but now are like some of your newer best friends because
Mm,
you find, hey, we're passionate about something. It's serving other people who also happen to be impacted by a disability. So you're loving someone with the gospel. You're being essentially what people call the hands and feet of Jesus to people by
mm,
practically being a friend, by helping them, by opening the door for them, by leading the way for them if they're visually impaired or blind. There's so many examples that I could give, but you
mm,
can be forming a whole new friendship with somebody else that you don't even know, you haven't even met yet, or maybe you've never even talked to. Maybe you know they exist, but this could be the opportunity for you to take another step of faith, um, conquer another fear, and maybe the Lord has that opportunity for you. Maybe this is something that you don't necessarily want right now, but later you'll say, well, I can't believe I almost missed this opportunity.
mm. If a local church is just starting out and they have really big hearts and they have the desire, but they don't have as much experience and they need help with training and equipping volunteers, do you have any recommendations for um, places that they could go, or books or resources where they could
Yeah.
get help so that the volunteers would be equipped?
Yeah, for sure. Because I mean, it's one thing to say just get started and everything will work out. That's not 100%. I mean, that'll work for next Sunday, but beyond that, what do you do? And so,
Mhm,
yes, like for in terms of training and preparation, um, there are several things I'd recommend, and I've already referenced Johnny and Friends, like the international ministry, and like I certainly would recommend them. Personally, I'd recommend them first just because of how many free resources they even have available on their website, on YouTube. So like that stuff you can just get right away. They obviously there are books too, and I do have some examples actually, but this is from their Irresistible Church series, and these are like they're really small, they're really short little booklets. But this one's,
mhm,
I think the first one start with hello, and it talks about just introducing your church to special needs ministry in general. So it's right from the beginning. But they've done, I think they have a whole series of these little books. Another one on respite ministry for families. So it's
mhm,
another type of program. I think the one that I always think of is a buddy program or a one-on-one program in the church. And that's just one aspect. There's respite programs. There's support groups for parents or families. There are so many other options that you can do, but those are the ones that are key. And especially if you think of a Sunday morning, like a Sunday school program, if there's an Awana program or a vacation Bible school, even just through youth group or even the worship service itself, buddies can be in any one of those settings.
mhm,
So yeah, again, Johnny and Friends is where I'd say start. um, Again, one of the things to keep in mind, I guess, about special needs ministry in general is basically for your church, you're trying to make this accessible and an accepting place. So that the word inclusive or inclusion is in this context, making the church accessible, both in terms of like physical, but also in terms of like social. So kind of in the aspect of people's heart attitudes towards someone sitting next to them in the pew, basically, or as they see them walking in the hallway, making a judgment about why is that person making those random motions with their arms, or why are they shouting out different words at different times. So making the church accessible and a culture of acceptance of these of families impacted by disability. And so just starting with that, and then starting with asking, asking the families that are already in your church. I think maybe this is helpful for me. Like, oh, there's so many possibilities. You can go anywhere, but like just simplify and come down to who's in my church right now that has a need, and then ask them specifically, like, how can we best serve you? What would help you the most while you're here? And then whatever their answer is, try to do that. And so I think starting with that would be helpful. And whatever that means, then do they need a one-on-one buddy? And then if somebody wants to serve in that capacity, how do you determine who that is? And so looking for people who have a passion or a heart for others, who are compassionate, have a gift of mercy, or for sure are responsible. And I should actually back up and say, for sure are Christians too. You want somebody who's investing,
Mhm.
assuming that in a church that everyone's a Christian is a bad assumption, right? I think you could be sitting next to someone on your pew who is there, um, and I'm glad they're there, but they don't know the Lord yet. The Lord's not their savior yet, and so this would be a good opportunity to evangelize, right? Evangelize the person sitting next to you. But um, starting small, asking the families in your church what would best serve their needs, utilizing a resource like Johnny and Friends through things like that booklet I showed you, the Irresistible Church series. Again, YouTube, they have several short videos that also address different resources on how to best equip your volunteers and how also to communicate the gospel, how to what do you want to say, boil down key truths from curriculum if you want to adapt curriculum in whatever class setting you're doing. Um, but yeah, again, for requirements for like for a volunteer, even in the buddy program, someone who is saved, but someone who has a heart of compassion, who's patient. Another key one is humility. You really can't go into this and stay prideful. I think you'll come out of it being humbled. So I think that's key too. But
Yeah.
looking for those godly characteristics in a volunteer, and then also a spirit, a willingness to learn. Because as I said before too, when I was going into it as a volunteer, um, I wanted to do it. I had a heart for it, but I was also nervous. I also had that, I don't have it all together. I'm not professionally trained. I can't tell you about every disability or condition or impairment. And like, well, that's not my job. I'm just here to serve whoever the Lord brought to me. So again, whatever family there is there in your church or families,
Yeah.
what are their needs? And so setting up your ministry and your programs based on what that is, that's what I was like when I say start small and lay that
Mm,
foundation, start there and like don't overwhelm yourself with like what are all the possibilities as you're working to serve these people you have there as the Lord
yeah.
sees fit. He might grow that ministry then and bring in more families to your church, and He will equip you and help you out um, as you grow.
What are some realistic expectations for volunteers if some of them are showing up and they think I'm not equipped, I don't know what I'm doing? Um, a what should a local church expect from people that say, "Well, I think I want to give it a shot, but I don't really know what I'm doing"?
Yeah, great question. Through the stuff that I've done with camp, we do a really good job of training our volunteers within the first day before families show up to camp. But that same style of training works in a church setting as well. And so um, I want to start first by saying, for let's just say it's somebody who's never worked with somebody who has a disability before. The first thing I would say too is just one of your goals right there is to form a friendship, be a friend. How would
Mm,
you approach? How do you start your other friendships with people who are um, typical, neurotypical? How do you start those friendships? Like, is there something that you try to find something in common maybe? But I mean, it starts again with a hello, a smile, asking questions, getting to know those kind of like icebreaker questions too, like getting to know someone. I mean, and that
yeah.
that might be tricky if we're talking about someone who's nonverbal. But again, this keeps going back to the word ask. So
Mm,
asking, meeting the family, asking the family, the caregiver, the parent, the grandparent, the sibling, whoever it is that is in the setting in church with this person impacted by disability, of asking them if this person can't communicate to you, how do they like to communicate? Because communication isn't always verbal. It could be eye movement, and eye contact, body language. It could be maybe maybe they actually do understand everything you're saying, but they can't speak, and so maybe they can point to something. Maybe there is no communication back, and there's really no discernible way. But the people who know this friend the best are the family members typically, and so they can say, if they sigh this certain way, they're having a good time, or they're acknowledging what you're saying. They know, and you might not ever understand that, but they do. So
yeah.
asking questions, actively listening. Again, assuming this is a verbal friend, a verbal speaking friend, actively listening and participating in activities with them in a Sunday school class setting. Maybe it's there's someone's sharing a story from the Bible, or maybe there's some sort of game or activity, a coloring sheet. Do it with them. Be their friend. And then in terms of actual training, there are a variety of ways to do this, but like whoever's leading the program, one way that's helpful is to also put yourself in their shoes essentially. So it's kind of a disability simulation training where you kind of you pair up with a buddy. So this is not with your disabled friend. This is with your other volunteer friends, basically. And you pair up and you kind of choose like um, choose a disability that you're trying to simulate. So if it, let's just say visual impairment or blind. So basically you would put on a blindfold and then there would be certain activities like coloring a crayon, like with crayons on a sheet of paper. If somebody's blind, one, would they choose to participate in the activity? Maybe, but maybe not. And so you kind of have to put yourself in their shoes. So when you're in a Sunday school class and you ask somebody, okay, or you say, hey, it's time for everyone to color. What if one person doesn't want to or can't? So you kind of have
Mm.
to then make those accommodations, right? And so it's just
Yeah.
kind of starting at the first point of put yourself in their shoes, try to understand what they're going through, have empathy for that, and then also try to experience it maybe the way they are. So like if somebody's saying, hey, the sky is blue. What does that mean to somebody who can't see? So just kind of putting your mindset in that place. Um,
Yeah.
Again, there are other resources again online and in books that can help with how to be trained, but really, being a friend, putting yourself in their shoes, making those connections, asking questions from the family and or parents, asking questions of your friend who has the disability.
Mm. Do you have any advice or warnings that you would give to people that are just starting out?
Yes. um, I guess one of them would be don't make this is so hard. Don't make assumptions. So that the advice and warning would be if someone looks, I mean, here I wasn't planning on saying this. If someone if someone looks what I guess you could say is severely disabled, I think of a friend who it has cerebral palsy and is in a wheelchair. He's also nonverbal, but he is able to hear, he is able to see, and assuming that because he just makes sounds, he can't really move a lot. He's in a wheelchair. He does, yeah. The assumption might be he doesn't understand a word I'm saying.
Mm.
Um, People kind of go into that maybe baby talk mode where you're kind of like talking to a young child, but like this guy's
Yeah.
almost my age, and so like making assumptions, mostly negative. I would say avoid that. That would be a warning. I guess you could maybe just always assume. I mean, I think this is a good life principle too, is always assume the best about other people first. And again, it's really hard to put in practice. I don't want to say I'm a hypocrite, but like there are times I for sure fail at this. So I'm just saying,
Mm.
assume the best situation, maybe two. Don't assume the worst. And then I guess on that other note is speak to someone at the level that you would expect someone of that age to be, and start there. I think that's a good
Mm.
warning slash advice.
That is really helpful. Well, I really appreciate you. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
sharing some of your experience
Sure.
and wisdom with helping some of these people that are just beginning their journey with volunteering at special needs ministry.
Well, thank you, and thank you to all of you who are serving and willing to serve and be that friend.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.